Stop everything. Close every tab on your computer. Tell your kids to go play outside. Tell your spouse this is important. Tell your dog to stop begging for treats. Because what I'm about to tell you in the next few minutes is going to determine whether you make the trade of your life or miss it completely. And if you walk away. If you think you can come back and watch this later, you're going to regret it forever. Are we clear? Good? 90%. That's the chance of the United States launching military strikes against Iran within the next few weeks. That's not me speculating. That's a Trump advisor telling Axios. CNN is reporting that multiple sources inside the administration confirm the military is prepared to strike as early as this weekend. And Trump himself said yesterday he'll decide whether to bomb Iran in the next 10 to 15 days. Ladies and gentlemen, the American guy here. It is Thursday, February 20th, 2026, and I need you to understand something. This is not about politics. This is not about whether war is right or wrong. This is about what happens to your silver and gold when the United States military deploys 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, over 100 fighter jets, B-52 nuclear-capable bombers, and a nuclear detection aircraft to the Persian Gulf. Because while that's happening, while the largest military buildup since the Iraq War is surrounding Iran, the Supreme Court is scheduled to rule today on whether Trump's tariffs are even constitutional. Gold is at $5,000 right now. Silver is at $78. And in the next 72 hours, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either those prices double or they correct. There's no middle ground. There's no wait and see. The window is closing. The clock is ticking. And you need to know exactly what each scenario means for your position. So let me break this down. I'm going to show you the full military deployment. I'm going to explain why Iran will never make a deal. I'm going to show you what Russia and China are doing in the waters around Iran right now. I'm going to explain what the Supreme Court ruling means for metals. And then I'm going to give you a 4-scenario matrix that maps out exactly what happens to your gold and silver under every possible outcome. Nobody else is connecting these dots. Nobody else is showing you how all of this converges in the next 3 days. So let's go. Let me start with Iran, because this is the variable that could change everything overnight. And when I say overnight, I mean literally. When the U.S. struck Iran in June 2025 during Operation Midnight Hammer, gold spiked above $4,000 in a matter of hours. There was no time to position after the news broke. You were either already in or you missed it. Right now, as I'm recording this, the United States military has positioned the largest force projection in the Middle East since 2003. Let me walk you through what is actually deployed right now. 2 aircraft carrier strike groups. The USS Abraham Lincoln is already in the Arabian Sea. The USS Gerald R. Ford is en route to the Eastern Mediterranean. And here's the key detail. U.S. officials have said the Ford's arrival will be a key factor in the timing of operations. When that ship arrives, the window opens. Around those carriers, a dozen warships spread across the Arabian Sea, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean. An Ohio-class submarine at an unknown location. That matters because Ohio-class subs carry Tomahawk cruise missiles. These are the platforms you use for precision strikes on hardened targets, like nuclear facilities. In the air, this is where it gets overwhelming. Over 100 fighter jets. F-35 stealth fighters, F-22 Raptors, F-15s, F-16s, A-10 Thunderbolts electronic warfare jets, 4 AWACS aircraft providing command and control, a U-2 Dragon Lady spy plane. And here's the one that made me stop and reread the report 3 times. A WC-135R. Let me explain what a WC-135R is. It's a nuclear detection aircraft. The military calls it the nuke sniffer. Its job is to detect nuclear material in the atmosphere. When you deploy a nuke sniffer to a theater, you're not bluffing. You're preparing for the possibility that someone uses a nuclear weapon, or that you strike a facility containing nuclear material and need to measure the fallout. And the most alarming addition, B-52 Stratofortress nuclear-capable bombers have been positioned at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. That's the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. It's miles from Iran. These bombers can carry nuclear weapons. I'm not saying they will. I'm saying the capability is now sitting on a runway in the Persian Gulf. The logistics tell the same story. Over 160 C-17 cargo flights since January 16th. THAAD and Patriot missile defense batteries deployed across the Gulf. Nearly 100 additional flights just for air defense systems. This is not a show of force. This is a staging operation for a weeks-long campaign. And if you think I'm exaggerating, the Israeli government is preparing for war within days. Not weeks. Days, according to Axios. Now let me show you the diplomatic picture, because this is where you realize Iran is not going to fold. Trump's envoys, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, met Iran's foreign minister for 3 hours in Geneva on Tuesday. Both sides said there was some progress, but a U.S. official called it a nothing burger. Vice President Vance said Iran has not yet acknowledged the red lines Trump has set. And Trump yesterday said he'll decide in 10 to 15 days. Let me be honest about Trump. He wants a deal. He has said repeatedly that he prefers diplomacy. The White House press secretary said Iran would be wise to make a deal. But Trump's preconditions are things Iran will never accept. He wants Iran to permanently halt uranium enrichment. He wants them to limit their ballistic missile program. He wants them to end all support for regional proxies like Hezbollah and the Houthis. Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei responded by saying, "The United States will never succeed in toppling the Islamic Republic." Iran's atomic energy chief said, "Enrichment is the basis of everything they do, and no country can take that away." This is the fundamental disconnect. Trump thinks the military pressure and the memory of Operation Midnight Hammer in June will bring Iran to the table. And he may be right that Iran is feeling the pressure. But Iran is not a rational actor in the Western sense. This is a regime whose parliament has chanted "Death to America" for 5 decades. This is a regime that attacked Udeid Air Base in Qatar during the last war. This is a regime that would rather go down fighting than surrender its nuclear program. And right now, they're running joint naval exercises with Russia and China to make that point crystal clear. Now let me talk about the part that keeps me up at night. Because this is where a regional conflict becomes a global one. Russia, China, and Iran just launched joint naval exercises called Maritime Security Belt 2026 in the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a symbolic gesture. Russian warships, Chinese naval vessels, and Iranian Navy and Revolutionary Guard boats are actively operating in the same waters where the U.S. would need to conduct operations. Think about what that means. You're the U.S. military planning strikes on Iranian targets. You need to launch cruise missiles from ships in the Persian Gulf, but there are Russian and Chinese warships in those same waters. You have to make sure their sensors don't give advanced warning to Iran. You have to make sure their platforms aren't in the way of your missiles. And you have to accept that any accident involving a Russian or Chinese vessel during U.S. operations could escalate this into something far beyond Iran. That possibility alone should scare everyone. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov explicitly warned that any U.S. strike on Iran would have serious consequences. He referenced the June 2025 strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities and said the risks of a nuclear incident are real. That's Russia, putting the U.S. on notice, and China has gone even further. According to defense analysts, China dispatched 16 military cargo planes to Iran in late January. 16. Likely providing defensive systems and logistical support. China has been helping Iran rebuild its missile and air defense capabilities after the June war. They signed a trilateral strategic charter with Russia for joint military exercises and intelligence sharing, and China is providing cybersecurity support to replace Western systems with Chinese ones, making Iranian communications harder to penetrate. When I read that, I realized this is not the same Iran that got hit in June. This Iran has been rearming with help from 2 nuclear powers. This is the CRINC alliance in action. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. 4 countries aligned against Western interests. China buys 90% of Iran's oil exports. Russia has reportedly agreed to supply Iran with 48 advanced Su-35 fighter jets. This is not an isolated country that will roll over when threatened. This is a country backed by 2 nuclear powers with a shared interest in seeing the U.S. fail. And here's why this matters for gold and silver specifically. Every time the geopolitical picture gets more complex, every time the risk of escalation grows, every time the possibility of this expanding beyond Iran increases, the safe haven bid for gold and silver gets stronger. This isn't just about Iran's nuclear program anymore. This is about the global order. And when the global order is threatened, gold goes up. Full stop. Now let me explain the mechanism by which war translates into higher gold and silver prices. Because it's not just about safe haven demand, it's about the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of global oil supply flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has threatened to close it if war breaks out. And if the strait is disrupted, even temporarily, oil prices spike. Energy costs spike, inflation spikes, and when inflation spikes, gold and silver explode. Gold went from $4,400 to an all-time high of $5,189 in January alone, partly on Iran war fears. It's pulled back to around $5,000 since then. If actual strikes begin, that all-time high gets taken out fast. Silver at $78 would look cheap, because silver is both a safe haven and an industrial metal. War disrupts supply chains. War drives inflation. War drives demand for physical metal. And remember, the COMEX has 88 million ounces of registered silver left. It's draining at 20 million ounces per month. If war panic hits on top of that, the delivery crisis I've been covering could accelerate dramatically. Think about it. If you're an industrial buyer, Samsung, a defense contractor, a solar panel manufacturer, and you see the U.S. about to go to war with the country that controls the world as most important oil choke point, what do? You accelerate your buying. you lock up supply. You go directly to the mines and pay whatever premium they ask. Because if the strait closes, global shipping gets disrupted. And if global shipping gets disrupted, the silver that's supposed to flow from refineries to manufacturers doesn't arrive. That's on top of a COMEX vault that's already lost 111 million ounces in 5 months. War doesn't create the shortage already exists. War makes it unsurvivable. Now, let me flip to the other side. Because there's a force that could push in the opposite direction, and it's happening today. The United States Supreme Court is scheduled to take the bench this morning, and they could issue their ruling on the biggest trade case in decades. Here's what you need to know. Trump used a law called IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to impose tariffs on virtually every U.S. trading partner. 10 to 50% on imports, Liberation Day tariffs, China tariffs, Canada tariffs, Mexico tariffs. No president in history had ever used this law for tariffs before. It was designed for sanctions during national emergencies. Lower courts said he overstepped. The Supreme Court heard arguments in November. Both liberal and conservative justices were skeptical, and while the court has been deliberating for over 100 days, the government has collected over $130 billion in tariff revenue. Here's the problem. If the court rules against Trump, the government may need to refund that money. Treasury Secretary Bessent warned it could reach $1 trillion by June. Justice Barrett herself said during arguments, it seems like it would be a complete mess. And Trump called it exactly that, a complete mess. But here's what I think most gold and silver investors are missing about this case. Even if the tariffs are struck down, the administration has explicitly said they will reimpose them through different legal mechanisms. They have backup plans. And Trump himself said the alternative processes would be more cumbersome, but he'll use them. So a negative ruling doesn't mean tariffs disappear. It means there's a brief window of uncertainty before they come back. And that brief window could create a short-term dip in gold and silver that, in my opinion, would be a buying opportunity, not a reason to sell. Here's what the tariff ruling means for your metal. Tariffs struck down means the biggest inflationary pressure lifts temporarily. Dollar strengthens short-term. Potential pullback in gold and silver. Tariffs upheld means nothing changes. Inflation stays. Metals keep climbing. But it's not that simple, because the tariff ruling isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening at the same time as the Iran crisis. And that creates a matrix of outcomes that I think is the most important framework you can have right now. Let me walk you through every possible outcome and what it means for your position. Scenario 1, war with Iran and tariffs upheld. This is the most bullish outcome for gold and silver. You get geopolitical crisis driving safe haven demand, plus inflation from tariffs, plus inflation from oil spike, plus supply chain disruption, all at once. In this scenario, scenario 2, war with Iran. And tariffs struck down. This is complicated. You get massive safe haven buying from war, but you also get relief on the trade front. In this scenario, I think war dominates. Gold still rises, silver still rises, because war is a bigger force than a trade ruling. The tariff ruling affects the economy gradually over months. War affects the oil market, the shipping lanes, and the defense supply chain overnight. But expect more volatile price action. Whipsaws in both directions as the market tries to price in two opposing forces simultaneously. I would not be surprised to see silver move 5% or 10% in a single session in this scenario. Scenario 3, deal with Iran and tariffs upheld. This is moderately bullish. No war premium, but tariff inflation continues. Gold holds, silver holds. No major move either direction in the short term. But the long-term bull case remains intact because the COMEX is still draining. The price floor is being built by miners getting $69 for $55 silver, and the structural deficit isn't going anywhere. Scenario 4, deal with Iran and tariffs struck down. This is the only scenario where gold and silver could face a meaningful short-term correction. War fears evaporate. Trade costs drop. The dollar strengthens. Risk-on sentiment returns. In this scenario, you could see gold pull back to $4,500 and silver back to $70. But I do not think this scenario is likely, because even Trump's own advisors are saying 90% chance of military action. And even if the Supreme Court rules against tariffs, the administration has said they'll reimpose them through other legal mechanisms. And here's the bigger point I want to make. Even in the worst-case scenario for gold and silver, scenario 4, the pullback would be temporary, because none of the structural drivers go away. The COMEX vault doesn't magically refill. The miner premiums don't disappear. The government price floor doesn't get canceled. Central bank buying doesn't stop. The global deficit in silver supply doesn't reverse. A short-term correction in the context of a multi-year bull market is a gift for buyers. That's how I think about it. Now, let me talk directly to you, because depending on your situation, you need to think about this differently. If you already hold physical gold and silver, don't panic sell on any short-term dip. The structural case has never been stronger. What you're holding is insurance against exactly the kind of week we're about to have. Whether it's war or trade chaos or both, Physical metal in your hands is the one asset that no court ruling, no missile strike, and no exchange intervention can take from you. If you're thinking about buying, understand that timing the exact bottom of a dip is nearly impossible. What matters more is being positioned before the next leg up, and the next leg up could be triggered by a single headline. A strike on Iran, a Supreme Court ruling, a COMEX delivery failure. Any one of these could move prices 10% or 20% in days. Waiting for the perfect entry might mean watching the move from the sidelines. And if you hold paper silver or gold, futures contracts or ETFs, understand that the January 30th crash showed us what the system does when prices move too fast. They crash it. They raise margins. They change the rules. Paper positions are vulnerable to exactly the kind of intervention that physical metal is immune to. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what the data says about how the system behaves under stress. So where does that leave us? Let me tell you where I stand personally. I think war with Iran is more likely than a deal. Not because I want it, but because the buildup is too massive to be a bluff. You don't deploy B-52s and 2 carrier strike groups and hundreds of fighter jets as a negotiating tactic. You don't move a nuke sniffer aircraft to the region for show. Iran has not agreed to any of Trump's preconditions. Their parliament chants, "Death to America." Their supreme leader says the Islamic Republic will never be toppled. And they're running joint military exercises with Russia and China in the Persian Gulf right now. That's not a country preparing to make a deal. That's a country preparing for war. On the tariff side, I think the court may not even rule today. They've delayed for over 100 days already. If they do rule, I think there's a reasonable chance they strike down the IEPA tariffs. But the administration will find other legal pathways to reimpose them. So even a negative ruling may only create a temporary dip. The net result, in my opinion, is that gold and silver are heading higher. The question is not if, but how fast. If war breaks out this weekend, it happens overnight. If there's a deal, the correction is shallow and short because every other fundamental driver is still intact. The COMEX is draining. Miners are getting $69 for $55 silver. The government is building a price floor. Central banks are buying at record pace. Dollarization is accelerating. One temporary trade ruling does not change the structural story. But a war in the Middle East, involving the country that controls the Strait of Hormuz, could change the price of everything overnight. Watch 3 things over the next 48 hours. First, does the Supreme Court rule on tariffs today? If yes, what's the verdict? If no, the next possible dates are Tuesday, February 24th, and Wednesday, February 25th. Second, does the USS Ford Carrier Strike Group arrive in the Eastern Mediterranean? U.S. officials have said that's a key factor in the timing of operations. Third, does Trump make any new statements on Iran? Yesterday, he said 10 to 15 days, but his advisors are saying the timeline could be shorter. And there's a fourth thing I'm personally watching, the COMEX Daily Vault Report. Because if war fears spike silver demand this weekend, Monday's delivery data could show accelerated drainage. That would compound everything. War premium on top of delivery crisis, on top of price floor, on top of miner premiums. All at once. This is the American guy. It's Thursday, February 20th, 2026. Gold is at $5,000 after pulling back from all-time highs. Silver is at $78. The military buildup is the largest since Iraq. Russia and China are conducting naval exercises with Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. And the Supreme Court could reshape the entire tariff regime in the next few hours. The next 72 hours will decide whether silver hits $100 or $70. You can strike down a tariff, you can rewrite a trade law, you can even crash the paper price of silver 46% in a single day. But you cannot undeploy 2 aircraft carriers. You cannot unposition B-52 bombers on a runway in Qatar. And you cannot put 88 million ounces of silver back into a vault that's draining at $20 million a month. The things that are in motion right now cannot be undone with a court ruling or a press conference. They can only be resolved with either a deal that Iran will not accept or a war that changes the price of everything. Don't say I didn't warn you. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this video, because when the strikes begin this weekend, or when the Supreme Court crashes the market tomorrow, your friends are going to wish they watched this. The war clock is ticking. The tariff ruling is today, and the end game is 72 hours away. This is the American Guy, signing off. God bless, and may silver set you free.